Good evening, and welcome to the April 9th, 2019 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the table this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, Blackberries, PDAs, or any other devices that might disrupt this meeting, please either be placed in silent mode or be turned off. Ms. Zarnicki, the roll call, please.
Mr. Abedin?
Here.
Ms. Cruz? Here. Mr. Faison?
Here.
Ms. Fowler? Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Mr. Tadapali?
Quorum is present. Item number 2 on tonight's agenda is approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting? Mr. Tagle. And a second? Mr. Abahidian. Ms. Zarnicki?
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abedin?
Yes.
Motion passes. The next item on tonight's agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 12th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. If there are no questions on the minutes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Mr. Rahman, thank you. And a second? Support? Mr. Lambert, thank you. Ms. Zarnicki?
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Abstain?
Mr. Abedin?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 4 on tonight's agenda is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So is there anyone here that wants to speak on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll move to item number 5.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to do this prior to Planning Commission comment. We have a new member, Dave Lambert. Dave is a former council member and former Zoning Board of Appeals member. And before we got into the meeting, I just wanted to welcome Mr. Lambert to the Planning Commission.
Agreed. Thank you for that. Welcome, Mr. Lambert. Item number 5 is a preliminary site plan review, file numbers SP 2019-0004. Proposed Life Christian Church Daycare, north of Big Beaver, west of Rochester Road, parcel 88-20-22-477-057, section 22, currently zone GB. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you. The first item tonight is a proposed daycare facility. It's about 13,000 square feet. It's located at 3153 Rochester Road. It's located on the same site as the existing Life Christian Church. The applicant proposes to share and utilize common parking area, and they propose to put the building in a grassy area of the site, which is currently used for overflow parking. In addition to the building itself, the applicant proposes other site improvements, including an outdoor play area, additional landscaping on the site, sidewalk improvements, as well as a stormwater management detention pond, which currently does not exist on the site. The graphic before you shows the site arrangement. The building is going to be located, excuse me. The building will be located south of the existing church. This is the existing church. The daycare is located south of the existing church. The area outlined in yellow is a 2,000 square foot play area. The new stormwater detention pond is located here adjacent to Rochester Road in front of the building, and there are 3 points of access, 1 off Rochester Road and 2 off Heartland. These are existing points of access. With regards to the building itself, it does comply with all the zoning ordinance requirements. It's 1 story, 23 feet in height, and it meets all the required setbacks. The main issue for Planning Commission consideration is the issue of access and circulation. Engineering has reviewed access and circulation and notes that there are 3 existing deficiencies on the site that should be rectified with the current application. The first issue is that the existing parking spaces on the site are short in length by approximately 2 or 3 feet in length. In addition, there is an existing drive aisle located here which is only approximately 15 feet in width. And thirdly, the existing drive aisle off Rochester Road is only 24 feet in width. Again, these are existing conditions. However, the timing now of the new application is the right time to correct these conditions. The corrections really are not that major to be done. What it would require would be simply losing some parking spaces within the existing parking area to both widen the drive aisles as well as lengthen the parking spaces. When considering parking, the site is overparked by its current use and will be overparked with the addition of the daycare. There are approximately 78 spaces on site. With the additional daycare, they're adding approximately 7 spaces. However, we do note with the changes to the configuration and circulation, we note they would lose approximately 9 spaces. So in total, they would lose approximately 2 spaces from the site that currently exists. However, based on the need for parking on the church as well as the daycare, there only needs 69 spaces. So in actuality, they would be 7 spaces over parked, even with the loss of 2 spaces on the site. Because of the the available parking for the Sunday use of the church and the offsetting times of the daycare, we do not think that parking on site will be an issue for the daycare use. With regards to landscaping, the applicant is adding a significant amount of landscaping. We do note that there is a requirement to screen the proposed daycare with the adjacent single family to the east. To the west. The applicant is proposing to maintain the existing landscape buffer that currently exists. It's a pretty dense, thick row of trees there. We do note that if the Planning Commission does approve that to act as screening, a condition of approval should be that it remains in place. And if it is taken down, then the required screening would need to be put in at the time when that is removed. The applicant has provided a pretty handsome building. It includes masonry material with appears to be a metal seam roof. This is the view of the church looking at the corner of Rochester Road and the access drive. This is the elevation that will front on Rochester Road. This is the side elevation that will face the church in the parking area. You can see the play area in the back enclosed in a fenced-in area. This is the elevation looking at from the parking lot. Again, this is the side of the building facing the church. This is the play area in the rear. And this is a bird's eye view of the proposed elevation. With that being said, we do support the development of the daycare and find it complementary to the use of the church. We also do support the use of shared parking as well as the request to waive the loading space. We do note that if the Planning Commission does approve the shared use of parking and the waiving of the loading space, we do recommend approval provided that the applicant address the engineering concerns with circulation, as well as there is a condition that the trees and brush that serves as a landscape buffer remain on site, and if they are removed, that additional screening would be replaced at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the Planning Commission for Mr. Mr. Carlisle? Ms. Cruz.
Did the applicant meet with either you or Mr. Savedant or both before coming before us this evening?
Yes.
Second part of my question. So help me understand, if they meet with you before they come before us, why do we have a bullet point list of things that need to be considered by the Planning Commission? I guess
assume
my
by
point-
both.
My point is that you express to the applicant what we're looking for. You know us well enough that you express to the applicant what we're looking for. And I'm sure that you explain to them that these would be the things that we would consider and that these would matter to your planning commission. So that's why I sort of asked the question.
Is there,
And you don't need to,
is there-
you know what, you don't need to respond to that. That's rhetorical.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Tagle.
Question about the term grandfathering a condition in when it's not being affected by a current project. Does that apply to a zoning ordinance requirement?
Yes, because they're actually using the existing non-conforming spaces and non-conforming drive aisle to serve the current need of the building, the new building. So in fact, it's not necessarily grandfathered in. It would be a new application that they need to come into compliance.
But they aren't doing anything to the parking lot?
They are not proposing to do anything in the parking lot, but this is the time to make sure it comes into compliance, and there are opportunities to do that with this application.
So is there, what would be a condition where it would be a grandfathered situation where it may not be compliant with the current ordinance?
I think if they were not proposing to use those parking spaces or use that drive aisle and it would simply be used by the existing church, I think we could look at it as a grandfathered use. But since they're going to use it for this facility, it would not constitute as a grandfathering of that site.
Especially when it's tied to public health, safety, and welfare, then it becomes more important.
Okay. Could you go back to the last page of your PowerPoint?
The recommendation?
No, the recommendation with the bullet points that we talked about. So the loading space waiver, can you explain that?
Yeah, it's a requirement in the zoning ordinance that any building over a certain square footage requires a loading space. The Planning Commission has granted waiver to that more recently for uses that do not need a loading space. Oftentimes, the requirement for loading spaces aren't needed because they simply don't get the amounts, they don't get a semi-truck. They may get a box truck, they may get something smaller, they may not get anything of that nature. So the Planning Commission has waived the loading space requirement, especially for use for office uses, daycares, schools that don't have loading. You have required it for restaurants or other uses that may require it, but for uses that don't typically need a semi-truck size loading space, it has been waived by the Planning Commission frequently.
Okay, so the loading space will be like a semi-truck.
It would be it's a designated size loading space that could accommodate a semi-truck is in the ordinance itself.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Appihidian.
Were there any other variations of site plan stormwater management than what was presented tonight, that was presented by the applicant?
Any other?
Any other variations of stormwater management?
No, in fact, the site doesn't have any stormwater management now, and so they're actually adding stormwater.
And
Yes.
was there any other variation prior to what was presented to us than what's tonight in terms of the detention pond being located somewhere else on site, or is this the only option?
This is a site that was shown to us, and it's been reviewed by engineering.
Anything else from Mr. Carlisle? No? I'd like to invite the applicant to come up to speak.
Good evening, Scott Bowers, Bowers & Associates Architects. We do understand the parking arrangement and the size of our aisles. We were going under the assumption of pre-existing condition grandfathered in. However, with those recommendations, we've taken a look at it, and we can accommodate the deeper spaces in all the recommendations by the engineering.
Is that your only comment?
That was the biggest one, I understand. We're trying to create a real, light and airy building for the daycare center, something just a little fresher than the church on the corner. A little fun, but not too much fun, so it doesn't look hokey, and it's very professionally done. Well landscaped. We're pretty excited about it. We think it's a great asset for the church. So pretty much, yes.
Just one question I had is the daycare center intended to serve the church population or the broader community?
I think it includes the broader, but basically the church, yes.
And the other questions I know, do you have any samples of the materials?
I do. Basically, the field brick is this color right here. It picks up a little of the tone from the existing church.
And is that the predominant
That's predominant.
color? Yeah.
The darker color you see on there is this brick. The wood Nichiha cementitious board really above the entryway is this color right here. The slate gray metal trimming around the parapet, and the windows would be a dark bronze.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question for that, Mr. Brahman?
I see that you write church there. That's not a church, right?
No, it's.
Is it going to be like that, or?
No, it'll be either the daycare or whatever we use within the ordinance. We just did that so everybody understood it was on the church property.
And is there any rendering, including the church, so that we can see, like, if there's any connection?
I did not do one of those. No.
Mr. Tagle?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the retention pond out in front. I noticed that it is about 4 feet deep, and I noticed you've got some trees around the edge of it. Do you expect standing water there? What do you expect in that pond?
We don't expect standing water. We did want it just to be a depression, and it was the low point on the site. The best for us to be able to retain what we need to for the stormwater management. In that location without disrupting the trees in the front and then the back. There is a kind of a ravine in the back as well. We're trying to stay away from that.
Are you planning it just to be a seeded depression?
Yes.
Yeah. I think we've seen some nice retention areas on a number of projects here in the city where there's a little bit more variety other than just a grassy depression. There may be some natural landscape that could be put in there or some stone or something. This is kind of your front door on Rochester Road, and I would really ask you to maybe consider, enhancing the landscaping in that depression area to maybe just present a little bit better, a little bit more in depth or a better looking frontage there.
Sure.
Thank you.
I think we can accommodate that.
How many services does the church have? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay.
I believe it's 2, but I do not know.
Okay. All right. Do they have any parking issues right now?
Not that I know of. They do use on special occasions the overflow, which we're putting this building on, but they've made other arrangements, and they do have also the piece of property directly to the west, I believe it is.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not aware of any complaints for parking issues on the site.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because churches today require more than most ordinances. These ordinances were written many, many years ago, and the modern day churches require more parking than what the ordinances require. In addition, now they've got 2 services, and depending on the spacing of those 2 services, you've got people that from the first service that if they haven't left, people from the second services are coming. Now, that's usually more of a problem for the church, because if there's nowhere to park, people won't stick around. But I just am asking the question, and it may be something we want to look at in the future as far as our ordinance.
Got a quick thought?
Yes, Mr. Krant.
You mentioned earlier that you would be in compliance with the suggestions from our planning director and his consultant as far as the size of the parking spaces. Did that also include in your thoughts the widening of the entrance off of Rochester Road from 24 foot to 30 foot?
It did, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just
Yeah,
dangling little things.
the widening of the entranceway, the aisleway, and the spaces decked.
Thank you.
Mr. Tagle.
One more comment. You've done a nice job. I think this building is a cost-effective but a very attractive, it will be a nice addition to an empty lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, Mr. Lambert?
Just one quick question. About how many, what's the maximum number of children that'll be able to use the facility?
We're licensed for 114 right now, up to 125 or 120, I should say. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's dictated by the size of the rooms that we have inside and the type of children that we have.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So this is not a public hearing, but at this point, if there's anyone in the audience that wanted to speak on the project, I'd invite them to come up to speak. Okay, seeing none, then I'll return it to the Planning Commission and see if there's any more discussion amongst the body on the project. No? Then are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay.
Me? Yeah, that's what happens when you say, yeah, we're ready. Okay, resolved that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed Life Christian Church daycare located on the west side of Rochester and north of Big Beaver, Section 22 within the GB General Business District be granted, subject to the following items. One, address the engineering access and circulation concerns for the final site plan, including enlarging the size of the parking spaces as shown on the report, and the tree bush area serving as landscape screen shall remain if in the future there will be removal of those bushes and trees. The applicant shall submit a landscape plan that shows compliance with the screening requirements.
Third point is the retention pond, right?
Oh, yes, the applicant agreed that he could enhance the vegetation in the retention pond, and we'd like to see that too as part of the resolution.
Thank you. Can I get a second support? Mr. Rahman, thank you. Ms. Zarnicki?
Mr. Hudson?
Yes, and I'd like to emphasize, I thought Mr. Tagle's suggestion as to additional plantings in the retention pond is a great idea, and we should keep considering that in the future with different projects. But I vote yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is item number 6. Special use and preliminary site plan review, file number SU 2017-0003. Proposed Bethesda Romanian Pentecostal Church addition, north side of Long Lake, east of John R., south of Tucker, 2075 East Long Lake, Section 12, currently zoned R1C, one family residential district. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you and good evening. The Planning Commission and the public should be well versed in this application, as this is, I believe, the 4th or maybe potentially the 5th time it's been before the Planning Commission. The church is requesting a 2-story addition on the north side of their property. It's approximately about a 20,000 square foot addition. It's located 20 feet from the Tucker Road right-of-way. The 2-story addition includes a gym and Sunday school classrooms, as well as a kitchen. The site is zoned R1C, and the proposed addition requires a special use permit. The item was last reviewed by the Planning Commission on October 9th, 2018. The item was postponed to address the following considerations. The first is the applicant shall review proposed landscaping and make modifications to assist and screen the property from adjacent neighbors. The applicant shall provide photometrics and lighting fixture details. And lastly, the applicant shall provide more detail on sound, deadening, and acoustics of the proposed addition. I do want to note that the applicant was scheduled with the Planning Commission, I believe, in some point in February. On that plan, they did show a screen wall located between the building and Tucker Road. That application was sent to the Planning Commission as well as the public reviewed it. It was pulled prior or during the day of the meeting. I do want to note that that screen wall is not on this plan, so if there is confusion about whether the screen wall exists or not, the screen wall does not exist on this application. So with regards to landscaping, the applicant did provide a detailed landscape plan to indicate the proposed screening. They proposed to use a double row of evergreens and a single row of deciduous trees. The evergreens at the time of planting will be approximately 10 to 12 feet. And these are firs, blue spruce, as well as 9-foot arborvitae. In addition, these evergreens will sit on top of a 5-foot tall berm. This graphic shows the proposed landscape plan. The lighter green spots and the darker blue spots indicate the 10 to 12-foot tall firs as well as spruces. The smaller kind of infill little trees indicate the 9-foot tall arborvitae, and these larger deciduous trees indicate the linden. So there will be a double row of evergreens as well as street trees along Tucker. This graphic shows the screening in relations to the houses on Tucker. This shows landscaping at full growth after 10 years or so approximately of growth. The applicant has provided a number of renderings that show the application at times, various times of planting growth. On the top indicates this is looking directly across from Tucker into the site. This top right corner shows the planting at time of planting. Again, these are approximately 10 to 12 foot tall evergreen. This graphic shows the planting after 5 years of planting. Again, you can see some growth. And then lastly, at approximately 10 years after planting, you can see that the landscaping has grown and filled out. This is a very similar graphic showing the planting. This is looking down Tucker Road towards John R. Again, this is the church building here in the corner. Again, planting for the first planting year. This shows 5-year, and then again, 10-year of growth. As requested, the applicant did provide a photometric plan. We do note that the photometric plan indicates that the photometrics and lighting does meet ordinance requirement. We do note that the photometrics only accounted for exterior lighting, so building lighting. It did not accommodate or account for interior lighting that would come through the windows at that taller height. And lastly, the applicant did provide an acoustic study. It shows the acoustics, and it shows that it'll be approximately 21 decibels at the property line. This indicates a faint noise. We do want to note that the acoustics level did show it with a screen wall, and again, that screen wall has been removed, so it would be assumed that that decibel level will be higher than the 21 decibels at the property line. Lastly, the Planning Commission is to determine if the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to meet the special use standards, and if it does find that special use standards have been met, the Planning Commission may approve the special use or preliminary site plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question, Mr. Carlisle. The acoustic plan, so just the methodology for that, when do they do the measurement? Is that at peak usage of the facility, or how do they quantify what the sounds will be and what the impact on the neighbors will be?
My assumption was the acoustic study was done at post-construction during the operation and use of the gymnasium and the kitchen and the Sunday school classrooms, etc. Okay. Did that answer your question?
It does. It does. Any other questions for, yes,
Mr. Chair, as I have in the past, I wanted to disclose that I actually live about 900 feet from this project, where this project is being proposed, and this time I would like to recuse myself from this meeting if there is no opposition from any other members of the Planning Commission.
if you feel you're conflicted, I don't have any issue with you recusing yourself, so. It looks like no one else does either.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Carlisle?
Okay, I have one question.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Rockford.
So I know that this is the 5th meeting. I'm new in the Planning Commission, so I haven't gone through all these. So I have a couple of basic questions. So this is going to be an addition to the existing building, right?
Correct. Correct.
So what will be the height of the building?
Give me,
The combined building?
give me 1 second, I can pull that for you.
Sure. I think it's 47 is the highest building and 30 is the one that the applicant
addition.
I
proposed.
believe the addition is 30 feet.
Right.
So which one we'll consider, the 47 or 30?
47 is existing, we're not considering that, we're considering the addition.
So this is just an addition of an existing building. So it's going to considered as one building or separate buildings?
For what purpose are you asking?
Because the setbacks needed between two buildings are not there, right? So
it's considered one building because it's attached.
if it is considered as one building, then the height should be 47 feet.
No, the height is existing. It's a legal non-conforming
Is the reason I'm asking?
situation. Let me finish this. So the existing building is legal non-conforming. It's not an issue, and the proposed addition is not increasing the non-conformity. So it's permitted.
So 30 is the height, right?
That of the addition, correct. What they're proposing from a height perspective is in conformance with the zoning ordinance.
No, I know, but then when it's separate unit building, right? But now it's combined, so one building. So there is no, because I'm very, I don't have too much experience on this, but I like to learn.
For purposes of zoning, it's one building. It is connected. The addition is connected to the main building. It's one building from a zoning purpose.
One building. If it's the one building, then 47 is the height. Because I'm coming from the setback standpoint, because if you look at the special use provision, Article 6.21D, I think it's for places of worship, there is a requirement that if you have something which is more than the requirement, you have to add 1 foot setback for each height increment. So my question to I think Mr. Carlisle will be, what is the current setback?
We dealt with this basically the first or second time this had come for the Planning Commission, and they actually had a height above 30 feet. Because this is we consider this an addition, and the existing main building is a non-conforming height, we are only requiring that the addition meet the setback, which is 50 feet. So the addition meets the setback requirement with the height of 30 feet.
But that building is considered as one building, then it's 47 feet. So you need to have 67 feet setback, right?
No, we're considering the main buildings. The main building is an existing legal non-conforming building.
Okay, I don't know.
I understand your question, and we dealt with it.
I'm just saying that because there is a setback requirement for when the church was built. I'm sure there was a requirement, and that's how we had all these spaces. Now we are building another building which is bigger than the existing church, and we are considering it's only 30 feet high, and then we are having only a 50 feet setback. I feel like it's kind of not clear to me like how it's possible. Why I'm okay with 47 feet, but then we just need to have 17 more feet of setback, so that instead of 50 feet we can have 67 feet setback. That's basically I like to have an explanation. Why we're not considering that?
It sounds like the ordinance doesn't require that, but I'll let staff answer that question.
So the planning director plays the day-to-day role of zoning administrator. So in interpreting the ordinance, I made the interpretation that the 30-foot high addition met the setback requirements. As the church does have rights for a legal non-conforming building in terms of height. So the 30-foot addition to the existing building does meet the setback requirement. They did have to modify the height when they first submitted it. It was too high. They had to reduce the height.
36 feet.
Yeah, and they now meet it. So that's the zoning administrator's interpretation of the ordinance, and for the purposes of the report, it complies.
So it was approved by the zoning administrator.
That's correct.
But to your point, we've talked about the setback and the massing and the impact on the neighbors. So the broad point you're raising is one that's been a concern for the Planning Commission. Okay,
so,
this project.
So I just want to clarify. Mr. Rahman has a vote. He's one planning commissioner, has one vote. And if Mr. Rahman feels that there's a negative impact associated with the height and the bulk and the setback, et cetera, that's valid. But what I want to be clear is, from a zoning perspective, that it's in compliance from a setback and height requirement.
I wanted to double check.
Yeah.
Because that this practice can continue, right? Like we want to start with a small portion and build the area we have a building, and then we continue and enlarge it. But then this is something that I thought that may not be approved by the zoning commission. But you think that this is done, then I'm perfectly fine with it.
It complies. However, you still, as a planning commissioner, have to apply the special use standards, which do address compatibility and the relationship with the building to the neighbors and to the street. But do not think that there's a compliance issue from a technical matter. There is not.
Because the report that we have doesn't explicitly mention that.
Okay.
I wanted to check. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Krent.
This would be, again, to our planning department people. I've got an issue with the compatibility of adjacent uses. And the thing is, what we're saying is, I can see that in 10 years, it'll probably be compatible. But do we have to, when we approve something, should it be compatible today or 10 years from now? How do we kind of... I know. Sorry for throwing you a curveball on this.
Well, no, it's up to the determination of the Planning Commission to determine if that's compatible or not. Whether that's compatible now with the 5-foot berm and the 10-foot planning, or whether or not it doesn't meet that, if it meets that standard or not. It's up to the interpretation of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thanks.
So just to add to the conversation. So this is a special use. Now this zoning district contemplates two types of uses. One is by right, and if it's a use by right, there's an inference that type of use is permitted in all instances, provided it meets all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. Because there's really not a lot of negative secondary impacts associated with that use. Then there's a special use. So a special use basically infers is it may or may not be appropriate for that property based on a case-by-case basis, when you have all the information, to determine whether it's compatible or not and meets all the other standards. So it's a case-by-case basis applying the criteria that is in your report. That's why it's a special use, is because there are more secondary impacts. And when you talk about a church, there's more massing, there's more people, they tend to be very cyclical, and there's busy times, there's down times, et cetera. We all know what places of worship, what they are. So, I want to be clear. It's a case-by-case basis, and every planning commissioner's role tonight is to apply the standards. And if you apply the standards and you believe that they meet the standards, you vote yes. Or conversely, if you apply the standards and you believe that they do not meet the standards, you vote no. I hate to break it down that simplistically, but that's your role tonight.
Any other questions for staff? No? Would the applicant like to come up to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tom Callas, K-A-L-A-S, and I'm here on behalf of the petitioner.
Good evening.
Also with me this evening are members of the church, the architect and the construction manager, to the extent there's any additional questions or inquiries. So we've had, this again is our fourth actual presentation to the Planning Commission. We were last here on October 9 of 2018, and there was quite a lengthy, I believe, couple hours or longer discussion and question and answer session with both the Planning Commission members and the residents who were present for the public hearing. This plan has undergone significant changes since first presented to the Planning Commission back in 2017. Again, as indicated by your planning consultant and director, the height was originally 38 feet. It was reduced to 30 feet. Significant plantings have been added to provide for screening and noise buffering for those residents along Tucker Drive. When we were here back in October, the meeting was tabled, as indicated by Mr. Carlisle, for the three following reasons, which was to provide the photometric plan, which we did, and it meets your ordinance requirements. And if there's any questions, I do have people here available to answer those. We were asked to review the landscaping, which we did, and we added additional plantings, minimum 10 to 12 feet high. These are spruces, they're evergreens, they're fast-growing trees, they grow high as well as wide, and they provide probably the best buffering and screening from both a visual standpoint and from a noise standpoint. We did at one time think of and actually presented drawings with a wall. But we felt that, and again, we would have needed a variance for that wall to get it to 6 feet high, because your ordinance doesn't allow for a wall that high. But after further consideration, we felt that, you know, the wall was not aesthetically pleasing. The walls do not grow in height, whereas the plantings do. And we felt that overall, the plantings and screening that we were providing would be a much better use and a much better screening element for the residents to the north. In addition, we provided a noise study, which was prepared by an outside professional. And the noise study looked at the decibels of the existing, of the church as built, of the addition as built, with the existing plantings at the time. So with that, and not taking into consideration the fact that these trees are going to go up to 50 to 75 feet in height, what that study revealed was that there was in essence, a decibel level of 20, which equates to a faint noise, okay? And that's for the noise that emanates from the church. By the time it gets out and dissipates and reaches the residents to the north, you're not going to hear anything, quite frankly. So we feel that, you know, with the screening that we provided, which was looked at by the noise traffic or the noise consultant, that this was the best way to go as far as, you know, giving the residents to the north what they wanted, making it look aesthetically pleasing. And again, we're here to, you know, put an addition to an existing use. So we're not coming in here and asking for a totally new use to put in this area. It's already a use that's there. We're merely asking for, you know, addition, as indicated by your planner, to allow for classrooms, a high school type gymnasium, and a kitchen. And as we indicated at the last meeting, the kitchen is not there to provide cooking on site and things along those lines. It's going to be to house food that comes in, keep it warm, serve it, you know, if there's a church function in the gymnasium, a church dance or whatever, you know, it'll be there to effectuate the intent of that. There's two services, but they don't overlap, one in the morning and one in the evening. At our last public hearing, In October, there were obviously residents that were, along Tucker Street that were opposed to the addition. We understand that. We're trying to mitigate, as much as possible, the addition to appease them and appease the Planning Commission. And there were also many residents or many parishioners who showed up, and also residents of the city who were in favor of the addition. So, we feel that we're not asking for any variances under your ordinance. What we're proposing is, in fact, a use that is allowed in your R1C district, although under the special land use criteria. So we feel that with the existing church that's there and what we're proposing, and again, the building was changed architecturally from the initial building. We tried as best as possible to give it a residential look. We added dormers. We broke up the roof line. There's no, if you see the dormers up there, there's no windows that, you're going to have glaring light coming out into the residential area or anything like that. We did submit a photometric plan that does meet your ordinance requirement. Everything will be on a sensor as required, by city ordinance requirement. And, we're not asking for, any variations or variances or anything like that at this point. We believe that we meet the ordinance requirements for this addition. We feel that it is compatible because of the use that's already there and the screening and buffering that we're going to provide. And it's not an intense use. For example, other uses that may be permitted under the R1C district, such as schools, cemeteries, assisted living facilities. Churches have their peak hours, obviously, and peak days. And then for the most part, they're dormant. The parking lots are empty. There's really nothing going on. So, and especially late at night, which would be a concern, obviously, for the residents along Tucker Road. So, with that being said, we feel we're at the stage right now where we've met the ordinance requirements. We feel we've met the special land use requirements as is outlined in your ordinance and in your packets. And we did submit renderings and as much detail as is required, and even more so under the ordinance. And we would kindly request tonight, barring any additional questions, that the Planning Commission would vote to approve the special land use request and the preliminary site plan, so my clients and we can proceed with this addition. We're excited. The parishioners are excited. It's a much-needed addition to the existing church, and it's a place where we can, parishioners can come, children can come. There'll be activities, perhaps, and it's just today we see these mega churches that are built, and they have all the amenities where people never have to leave the site. And we're not obviously a Kensington or anything like that, but this addition we feel will be fit in with our existing goals, and is compatible for not only the parishioners but for the neighborhood. So I'm open to any questions, as are my clients, and I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Just two questions from me initially. The acoustic calculation, I think you said it was done on the existing church property?
As built. When built out.
So not the existing church property. So it would be this project with the
right after expansion. It's built out. Right. That's the 20 decibel level is the level after the addition is built, which again equates to a faint noise. It's one of the lowest decibel levels you can ever achieve. So.
And then the other question I had was the hours of operation of that, the extension, the gym, the community activities that you'll have there.
I have the pastor here. He can answer that for you.
Good evening. My name is Simeon Timuk. I'm the senior pastor of the church. The schedule we have during the weekdays usually is up to 9 o'clock, 9:30. And that will be also about 2 or mostly 3 times a week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday.
Thank you.
This is what we have.
Are there any other questions for the applicant from the Planning Commission members? Mr. Krent?
This would probably be directed to the architect, but those dormers that are along the top, do those emit any kind of light, or are they just black?
Art?
My name's Art Kalajian, architect, and it's to provide natural light into the building during the daylighting to give it a more ambient, natural feeling. Without it, I feel like you'd see too much of the roof, and it wouldn't be as. If you saw my original proposal, I had the whole thing surrounded by glazing, and I felt to destroy that concept of daylighting would architecturally. It's beyond just a gym. I tried to give it a fellowship look, so it's to enhance the environment as well. We have lighting that is more dimmable for like night activities, such as being fellowship hall, which is why it's being used as a dual purpose. So there's two types of lighting in that facility. There's going to be gymnasium type lighting, and then there's also fellowship type lighting, and most of it's going to be LED type of lighting. There'll be some light that might be emitted through it, but nothing like was initially in my original design. And it's really to enhance the ambient feeling of the space. It's only, I think, three dormers, and then there's one in the back. And also, the purpose of the dormer was to give it a more residential look. I would rather see something architecturally more interesting than a lot of shingles. So it was multiple reasons why I felt the dormer would be there, and it scales it down to one of the concerns was a residential type of look. Actually, our building is lower than a lot of two-story homes, and the 30-foot that's mentioned, technically by the ordinance, is less than 30 feet because they go by the top high point to the eave height, and you take the halfway point, and that's the actual designated height of the building. So you're really looking at something more like 25 feet if you want to get in a technical sense per the ordinance. But we're saying this high point is 30 feet, which is beyond the standards that are typical when you have a height restriction. So to help him understand the height issue, I think the one gentleman here, we actually are lower than actually a lot of two-story homes. So we feel it's the size of the building that's bigger than a house. We understand that, but that's why there's like a multiple height now to the roof that I didn't have before. There's a higher point towards the street and a lower point as it recedes to the residential area. So the overall intent was to sculpture the massing of the building with the dormers to give it a residential style. And really, it's just the length of the building is bigger than a home, but the essence of the setback and the structure and the size is similar to a house, but it's just longer. So I think overall it does meet the characteristic and harmony of the residential area, and eventually it'll totally be hidden by the landscaping. So even if it doesn't meet the initial planting, as Tom was concerned about, I think the transition period till that point is still attractive, and meeting the residential characteristics because of the height, the size, and the architecture that I tried to create to match a house type of architecture. And it also meets, there was one rendering that shows it in competitive from the front view. I think it's set back from the original church, and I think it still is attractive and meets the architecture of the compatibility of the existing church. I don't see the very first one, but it kind of gives you a view from the street, I think.
This is the PowerPoint. We didn't use every rendering, but I can pull it up.
I'm looking for, this is not a colored version, but this one. It kind of shows the view from, this one's a good shot. So it kind of gives it an idea of how it ties in with the existing church, and looks like it's same brick will be used. It'll look like one type of building, but a little different and lower in scale and massing of the existing church. We wanted to make the existing church still prominent the most paramount part of the site. So we tried everything we could to make it compatible, and the acoustics that wasn't explained is based on a music room at 95 decibels, which I don't think it'll ever reach that level, but we took the worst case scenario and applied it. And so I think we used STC of 56. I think John would probably understand that, being an architect, but it's what they use for music rooms and high-level areas, and we'll use that to the exterior walls, and that's how we meet the STC that's there. So Church is willing to spend the extra money for the STC rating of the walls, triple glazing, and then they're going to have light control to make sure the lights don't stay on like it was mentioned, which I don't know if it really does, but nowadays with buildings for Michigan standards of energy, we have to have light control that automatically will shut off when it doesn't sense people there, and this building will have that. The other thing that wasn't mentioned was there was concern about the trees and the landscaping. We did introduce in the packet a sprinkler system design to ensure that these trees don't die, and I'm sure that Pastor is going to now have a maintenance program because of the concerns of the neighbors in the past. So I think we're doing everything we could conceivably think, I hope, to make this a provable solution. But I don't know if there's any questions for the architect, but glad to answer it.
Any other, Mr. Tate?
You mentioned the acoustical calculations were done by a specialty company. Who was that?
I don't know the name of the person, but it was done on a computer model, and I think it's the source is on the diagram there.
Again, I'm not an acoustician.
Yeah.
But the calculations you've shown are for the solid portion of the wall, and I understand that. But when you look at your elevations, there's a lot of window, and that performance through those windows is going to be different than the performance through your solid wall. I'm not telling you that I'm not here to say that it's not.
Right. It's not a perfect solution.
I'm here to say that it's probably not the 20 decibel reading that is suggested in this presentation.
You're right. It's based on the wall.
It's something greater than that. Whether that's a level that would be obnoxious across the street, I'm not here to say that. But all I'm saying to you is be careful when you make a presentation of saying, the STC rating at 50 feet is this, only taking into consideration a portion of the wall.
Right. The one thing I'd like to add to that, though, is the glazing being up high, the sound will shoot up rather than going horizontal, so the wall is the major factor, and that's what they looked at. It's not going to be a perfect model because the wall was the major thing, but the way sound waves do move up, it'll bypass, and I'm told by the time it hits the house, it's almost non-existent. Because it's a what you call exponentially lost phenomenon. So this is right at the property line that we showed it, which is really quiet. So if we don't meet that because of the windows, it's going to be still very quiet, and we do have double the ST rating of a wall that's typical, which is typical of a music room next to another classroom. So I think your concern is valid, but I think it still will be a good solution.
Yeah, my point was just the presentation. You want to be careful what you're presenting to us, because there are some on this board or this commission that may not understand it and say, well, it's this. Well, in reality, it's not. It's going to be something greater than that. Is it to a point where it would be objectionable? I don't know.
Right. That's fair.
There was also a comment made about the landscaping being better acoustically to screen the noise than a wall. I would like someone to explain that to me, how a plant would act as a better acoustical barrier than a masonry wall.
This is based on, so I've been involved in studies before involving Meijer grocery stores, and we didn't obviously look at the comparison here on this site, but when you have spruce trees and evergreens, and when they're planted and grown, and the density of that screening you know, you've got 2 rows of evergreens here, okay, plus deciduous trees and other plantings. So the noise having to get through those, unless you're going to build a 15-foot high wall or a 20-foot high wall, so.
Well, I will tell you from my experience that depending on your frequency of your generating sound, it's the mass of the barrier.
Well, there's many
that's going to
variables,
knock that
yeah.
down. And the trees don't have a mass. The wall has mass.
Yeah.
Now, if you want,
you know, that thickness compared to a wall, you know, is, my experience is much better, and we've used this throughout the state on much larger projects involving mega stores. The buffering, the planting buffering is always the preferred route.
want to talk about aesthetics, we can talk about that all day, whether we think trees are a more attractive screening element than a masonry wall. But from an acoustical standpoint, the mass does a better job than the tree or the planting itself.
Yeah, and there's many variables, so we've looked at both throughout the years.
One last question, if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
I missed the last meeting, unfortunately, but what happened to the wall? I mean, last time you guys were in front of us, I got the impression that the wall was an acceptable approach to help not only screen the building, but the acoustical aspect of it. And now, as we were told tonight, the wall has been removed.
Correct.
And I think the presentation was, we thought it was a better solution. Tell me about that.
Well, aesthetically and buffering and screening wise.
Did it have anything to do with cost?
Not really. When we looked at it, we felt this, if you look at this rendering here, we feel that's a much prettier rendering than what it would look like with a wall there.
That's the 10-year rendering?
That's a 10-year rendering, yes.
Okay. All right, well,
yeah.
Fine, thank you.
And it may be, in the beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
That's right.
So, but we felt it was a much better solution, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the applicant? Yeah, Mr. Krent.
Can you give me the approximate size of the glazing, the windows that face Tucker, each window size? Looks like about 10 by 10 feet, or?
No, the windows are probably a neighborhood of 6 feet with a circle round on top, and then a neighborhood of 4 to 5 feet wide.
Okay.
And with the dormers themselves, it looks bigger, but they're not overly sized.
Okay, so 5 by 6 foot windows?
If you count to the very top, it's probably more like 7 feet, but it's curved.
Glass is curved?
Well, there's a circle. I don't know if it's that visible, but there's a circle window. There's a straight window with a curve to the top of it.
Okay. There's that center one. Yeah, that one little center one.
But, no, all the windows on the door.
Oh yeah, I see. Okay, across there. All right, but there's. It seems like 4 of them are perfectly rectangular. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, good enough.
The one thing I'd like to add about the wall scenario, we did seriously look at that too, but one of the issues why it became an issue of removal, as well as we thought having the higher height trees was better, was the fact that it was not allowed. We would have to table everything, go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, see if they would like it and come back. So we were trying to also come up with a solution that didn't require a variance, which that would have required. If we stuck with the actual code, we would only be allowed to have 2.5 foot of walls, and that would not really do anything. And that was a paramount reason why. I like the wall solution myself, but aesthetically I had a curved wall, but this is a solution that's aesthetically, I think, in the long run, the neighbors would like, as well as we went and doubled the size of a tree that is normally allowed in initial planting. So we thought that was enough to help the solution, I thought.
Might as well stay up here.
Anything else for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Lambert.
Just one quick question. Like my colleague here, I'm new to the Planning Commission, but is the height of the proposed addition primarily driven by the fact you want a gymnasium in the addition?
Yeah, both the gym and the two-story. Yes, there's a two-story portion in the front.
Stay up here.
That's a little bit higher, and that's based on just the height you have to have for a two-story building. It's a little bit higher, but the gymnasium needs it 20-foot clear structure within the 50-foot play area, and we're right at the very edge, and we're also thinking of using a pre-engineered building that will help the height to be dropped as much as it can. That's what we're thinking at this point. It was a wood structure, but we did everything possible to make it work as a gymnasium at the minimum height, and based on a high school court, which is 20 foot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is not a public hearing. We've had a public hearing on this item before, and we've gotten feedback from the public. That said, if there's anyone here from the public that wants to speak on this project, we'd welcome them to speak. But I would say that again, we've heard feedback before on the massing, the landscaping, and some of the broader issues that we've discussed here already. So again, if you have more to add that we haven't covered, I think those comments would be welcomed. But again, if anyone here from the public would like to speak, I'd welcome them to speak today.
Mr. Chairman, are you going to place a time limit on the comments this evening?
Absolutely. Maximum time limit is 3 minutes. It looks like someone wants to speak, so.
Hi, my name is Fadi Salem. We live on the first house as you enter Tucker, 2015 Tucker. Okay, as you all mentioned, this is not the first hearing. This is number 4 or 5. So my question is, when does no means no? We moved into this house in 2000. And when we purchased the house, we saw it's a dirt road, it's a dead end, and we accepted it the way it is. It's residential. So now you're trying to change it and make it a gymnasium. The traffic, the noise, and everything else. So, not to mention they're presenting studies that is completely false. The walls are removed. Then the gentleman says it's a whisper. This is nonsense. The other thing is that as it's a gymnasium, it's not going to be a Sunday school where it's Saturday, Sunday. This is going to be, kids are coming over. That's going to be a week-long project. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's a gymnasium. The other thing I wanted to mention is that there are several projects. They wanted to change Tucker from a dirt road. We said no. They wanted to open the Tucker. We said no. So we accepted Tucker the way it is. And changing the property value will change because of the building. The building is not a small building. It's a massive wall as you walk out of your house. Not to mention it spans over 3 homes, not just 1 or 2. Also, the gentleman referred to Kensington, big churches. These churches has their own place, their own property they sit on, appropriately so. I drive John R. daily. I can hardly see Kensington Church. And in previous times, they said, we are expanding. So this is a wonderful thing for the church, but the church has a particular size, occupancy, I'm sure restrictions. Sooner or later, it's going to be too small. So what's their plan? The other thing they said, the kitchen is going to be to host food. How can we verify this information? I mean, they presented us information with acoustics that's incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this project?
Good evening. Chris Hausner, 2071 Tucker Drive. Been there for 20 years, and I'd like to thank and recognize the two new members for your donating your time to hear us today and get up to speed on this. So I'm glad you allowed us to speak. I just want to point out that this is a one-family residential area.
Excuse me for 1 second. Brent, are you timing?
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. And what we're trying to do here is build an NBA-sized court in the middle of our residential area, surrounded by three sides by homes. I just want to start out by saying back in 2008, our struggle started with the church because I sent this letter to the city then because of the poor maintenance of the property back in 2008. This tree you see here was dead laying, standing there for 10 years. Nobody came and cut it down. They cut it down last year just prior to coming here after we looked at dead trees there for 10 years. Here's the letter from 2008. Okay, so we've had this struggle for a long time, 18 years. The church invited us over to come see their renderings and all their drawings. Thank you, we want to be part of that. And then I invited them to all and said, come stand on my front lawn and look at your direction. You never come in the back of your church, and when you do, you see our beautiful homes. But when you stand in our homes and you look across, there is no landscaping after 18 years. So all these drawings they show you, there aren't any. Okay, whose fault is that by saying, I don't want to water, I don't want to take care of it. I don't even go back there and look, and there's dead trees that I sent that letter to the church, and they still sit there for 10 years. Yes, thank you. And then if you look at it realistically, in this drawing here, there's three homes. One of them is mine, across from that church. This is a 19,000 square foot add-on, bigger than the church basically. We have three homes there. If you added up the square footage of all our homes, it wouldn't even be half the size. So you're basically shoving 8 homes worth of space right across from our home. So you heard from the prior neighbor the size. And then I want to show you this. This is a great slide, I think. First, if you notice this drawing, all our homes are drawn really large. My home is half the size of that facility there, the way it's drawn. This is not an accurate drawing. The information that you've been provided has not been accurate. Here's my property line. You know where my property line would have to move over a good 10 or 15 feet. So they're really only showing you 2 homes in front of that. There's 3 homes. Okay? So these drawings are not accurate. And just like the sound, we took the plan with the wall, now there is no wall. I'm not advocating a wall because I'd rather have green space. And what I want to say is that it's all kind of shady. What is the real use of this building? We don't know. It could be a gymnasium or whatever. It could be party all night long. It could be anything. And if they ever leave when they outgrow it, because their parking lot's already full to the max, and they're going to double the size of their facility. So I urge you to preserve the residential feel of Troy. And this area is totally surrounded by homes. Do not allow this massive building right in the middle of our homes. And what does a church need? An NBA-sized facility other than to raise more money. Okay, and there will be more noise, more lights, more everything. You can't build a facility of 19,000 square feet and say it's going to be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting us speak this evening. Next slide. Yeah. So we talked about the compatibility. Obviously, this building is not compatible. There's been no change to the length and the setback of the building. And I do want to point out on this slide that the majority of the homes on Tucker have a much larger setback. This building will be 50 feet. All the homes on the street are probably 100 plus. So how can this be compatible with our neighborhood? We heard about the mayor talking about the upcoming survey that the residents are going to be taking. He talks about the green space, maintaining the green space. Residents want more green space in trails in the neighborhood. I hope you listen to the residents' concerns today. Again, we talked about all the lights. This proposed addition will have significant amount of lights reflecting right on our homes. And again, why is an NBA-sized gym needed for this facility? And they don't need 13 classrooms for Sunday school. I had to find out from the parishioners that they are planning to open a private school in the future. Where is the integrity in this process? So I don't understand how this could be, not brought to everyone's attention. Again, the significant loss of green space. The master plan speaks to the preservation of residential neighborhoods, and the tenet of the master plan is the protection of the single-family homes. And I have to say today, those classrooms there, I don't see some of them used. They're dark. Why do they need 13 classrooms for Sunday school when you can fit 25 students in a classroom? The math just doesn't add up to me. Again, these are the lights we're seeing today reflecting in our homes. Sometimes these lights are on all night long. In the spring, they don't maintain their lawn. They just cut it. Weeds we see every year. They don't maintain their trees. They don't prune their trees. They don't mulch their trees. So again, how can this be compatible with our neighborhood? More pictures of lights. You can see this, right, reflecting. Imagine that 50 feet from our homes. It will be, very significant damage to our neighbors here. They talked about they don't have parking issues. I randomly went 3 days last year, July 22nd, October 21st, November 4th. You can see they're parked in the driveways, in the aisleways, in front of the church. So I'm really hoping today that you take the residents' concerns into consideration. Thank you very much.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on the application?
Okay, I didn't send it. I thought we'd have last time. I'm Deb Taj, 2088.
One sec, Deb. Did you send it for the last meeting?
Yeah.
Would you like me to pull it up?
Okay, a lot of these things have already been stated.
Okay.
I just want to say that I worked in human resources for over 30 years at General Motors. And one of the things that we worked with our managers is past behavior is a great predictor of future performance. These individuals will say what they want right now, and they're going to maintain the property. And in that, before, we had only 47% of the contracted landscaping, of which they never completed. There's a letter that was sent to them on November 17th of 2000 by Ron Hind, by Mark Stimac, because plantings were never planted. And they never got planted. So what recourse do we have? They say one thing, but their performance or their behavior is something else. They will do whatever they want once they get approval. Just like that kitchen will probably be a kitchen, 50 feet from our bedroom window. I'm just beside myself with what Troy is doing to the green space and what these people have said. The parking issues they have, they park in the fire lane. The mayor told us, called the nuisance line. So we did. But they don't give tickets, so the rules don't apply to them. You can park in a fire lane without getting a ticket, and they're there. What happens if something does horribly happen with a fire? They're going to take that risk, just like they're going to take the risk that they have children upstairs in an area that was not designated as classrooms, was for storage and offices. But they do whatever they want once they get the approval of the Planning Commission. So, anyway.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the application today?
Hello everyone, I'm Bokai and I live in 2043 Tiger Drive, and right from the the church, and I just want to give some feedback after last hearing. And after last hearing, I start to look at or observe the daily light usage for the church, and I found there's more frequently light use than after last hearing. So that's bothered me a lot right now, and I'm always like start looking at the church light during those months, and I'm starting considering that the plan was very necessary. And for the proposal, like if they need 10 years to grow up the plant, so what do we do for those 10 years? What are we gonna suffer from even the noise, the light issues, and also yes, if the proposal meet the standard or any specifications, and you're gonna vote yes. But if there's any rooms to be improved, so is that still a good proposal to be voted as yes? I highly doubt that. So I think if everyone can hear our neighbors' concerns will be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak tonight? Members from the public, right? Oops, sorry.
I just want to remind everyone that this is not a debate. So if this is a resident who wants to speak and add to the conversation, fine, but the purpose is not to rebut comments that were just made by the residents.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Romeo Pling, honorable members of the commission. I'm the assistant pastor of Bethesda Church, one of the founders, and a proud citizen of Troy. I would like to just not to rebut, just to correct certain things that were said. Especially, it's not an.
For 1 second, brother. You tell me.
This is a multifunctioning room that's referred as a gym, but it's not an MBA. It's not even a college. It's a high school size gym, and also there are now 13 Sunday school classrooms. It's just 8, and this is exactly for certain things that we encounter right now with the facilities that we need to have these Sunday. So I'm also the pastor of education, and it's something that we want to continue to instill in our citizens and in our children and youth. The ethical, the morals that we as a community we want to implement and infuse our younger generation. This is something that we really need. It's absolutely needed for our community to continue to invest in the younger generations, the principles of morality and ethics, and what would make our young people good citizens and productive citizens. And we would like to ask you, this is our indeed 5th appearance. One was postponed, so 4 appearances. And we thank you for your patience with us. It is something that we absolutely need to better function and safely function as a community. We're so thankful for your patience with us, and we ask you to please give us the approval to go forward with this project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And one more thing, I have 10 more seconds. There was not ever spoken about creating a high school or a daycare. This is only strictly facilities to be used on Sundays or once or twice a week. Never was the discussion that was a misinformation coming from people that obviously don't like us. I'm done.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak on this item that hasn't spoken already? Yes, miss.
name is Lydia Simpan, and I'm a proud resident of the city of Troy. I've lived here from birth, and we have owned probably 8 properties here. We love Troy. We currently own 2 in the city, and we live here. Our church is here. I have 2 young children, 11 and 9. They are in the Sunday school system. So to explain why it is necessary to have those classrooms, I taught as a Sunday school teacher at our church. And I am a teacher by profession. And so when you are teaching, everyone knows, especially with young kids, you want a little bit of extra space to be able to do certain activities with them, to reinforce lessons, to allow them to work out their jitters or their extra energy. At the current classroom, the way it is, there isn't room for that. We have to let them go outside if it is good weather. Typically it isn't, because we have Sunday school classrooms from September to about mid-June. So summertime, there is no Sunday school classrooms. The classrooms that we currently have, we're constantly rotating with the students. Okay, if I have a bigger class when I was teaching one year, then I would go to this classroom. If I had a smaller class, then next year I would go to that classroom. And it's a constant rotation for us. So this would provide a solution for us, for our students, for our children. And I really hope you guys would take this into consideration for the gymnasium. I have nieces and nephews that are teenagers and early teens. So this is something that it's a place for them to get together with our leaders, with parents. So not necessarily the Boys and Girls Club. You have to rent that out. So that's not practical for us as a church. To have our own facility, to have our own gatherings when it is time, and for parents to be there to monitor. So it's not just kids showing up and then going wild and then the neighbors have to suffer. Congregation, like adults, would be with them, so everything would be controlled, supervised, and I really love the city of Troy. And I love that my church literally is 5 minutes away from me. And so I would like to be able to live in the city of Troy and have my church be able to provide the needs that my kids have. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wants to speak that hasn't yet spoken? Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it back to the Planning Commission table.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Can I speak?
Yes, Mr. Hudson, absolutely.
I've been here for all 4 sessions and that one aborted session. Every one of these sessions has been characterized by a great deal of passion and hyperbole. For instance, the slide I saw tonight said high entertainment center in this church. It's a gymnasium. They're not going to have Bob Seger concerts or the Rolling Stones in here to disrupt the community.
That would be Justin Bieber now.
I'm old.
Yeah, those other guys are almost
roll with it, Karen. NBA-sized gym. You know what that is? That's a 50 by 94 dimension. This one is 50 by 84, which is the Michigan High School athletic standards for typical gymnasiums. It's a multi-purpose room. These petitioners have remodeled over these 4 sessions the initial project. It was too tall. It's been reduced to 2 stories. We look at the adjacent neighborhood. We're only focusing, apparently, in this discussion on those to the east and those to the north. If you look to the south and to the immediate south, it's commercial properties abutting this property. If you look at the corner of the intersection, which is part of the neighborhood here, it's a church. I'm telling you, everybody ought to kind of get a grip on themselves and sit back, take a deep breath and say, this is a church, they're good neighbors, they've made every change we have asked, they're in conformity with the ordinance. I see nothing wrong with this project.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Any other comments? Mr. Tagle.
I have to agree with Mr. Hudson on some of the comments that I've heard tonight. NBA-sized courts, they're only doing this to raise money, and for the residents to think that they know why this church is needing this expansion without really asking the church, I think is disingenuous. When I look at the criteria that we need to evaluate this project on, you know, as far as its compatibility, yes, it's a big building, but it's a building that can be done in this zoning district. They have attempted to mitigate the massing. Is it perfect? Maybe it's not, but they have made attempts to hear what the neighbors are saying and to reduce the scale visually for the folks across the street and down the street. There was a comment about traffic, and I'm not quite sure if I understand the impact that this addition will have on Tucker Street, unless somebody from the church lives on Tucker Street. I'm not sure what impact that's going to have. As far as the noise, again, what was the material they presented 100% accurate? No. But they, again, have made an effort with the glazing materials they're going to use. They've provided you with some information about the construction. So I think they've made an effort there. And the question is it unreasonable impact? You guys are sitting on the corner of John R. and Tucker. How many thousands of cars go up and down that street every day, and the noise generated from the cars? So I have to ask myself, is this an unreasonable building for this corner of a major street, major thoroughfare, and a side street? I don't know that it is an unreasonable development for this particular piece of property. Thank you.
Anything else? I see merit in both your comments, Mr. Hudson, and yours, Mr. Tagle. And as I look at it, I hear the residents and their concern about the impact. I hear the applicant and what they're trying to do and the need that they see for the project. And also acknowledge that they've been before us 4 times, and we've seen adjustments based on feedback that we've given. But when I look at it, and I look at the special use standards, and I think of particularly the compatibility with the adjacent uses, and I get they're at a busy intersection, but I think the truly adjacent uses are those homes across Tucker and to the east of the church. And I struggle with this project being compatible with that. Yes, Mr. Tagle.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at every zoning ordinance that I've ever seen, a church is allowed in a residential, single-family residential. Mm-hmm. And this is historical. This goes back a long ways. A church is never compatible in size with a single-family home. So that at some point in our history, and it hasn't changed, that there is a level of acceptance for this type of a building type in a single-family residential. Now, to say this building isn't in the middle of a residential zoning district, it is bordered by a major thoroughfare. So I understand what you're saying. I appreciate what the residents are saying. But I also think that these people have a right to do what they're doing. And the compatibility and the size issue, I mean, would it be acceptable if the building was 3/4 the size? Half the size? You know, what's the number? These people have a need. I have to believe that their need is genuine, and this is what they want to do. I will say that I didn't say a minute ago, we have heard historically the church has not done what they said they're going to do. And if that's true, shame on you. Because tonight, if you get approved based on these plans and based on what you say you're going to do, I pray that you do what you say you're going to do.
So in response to what I've heard from the chair and from Mr. Tagle and from Mr. Hudson, I agree and disagree with everything that has been said tonight. I don't think that the church has demonstrated that they've been good neighbors. And I struggle with that. I have a problem with that. I also understand that a church is always going to be bigger than the houses that surround it. But I don't think that a church should receive special dispensation over any other kind of building that may ask for an enhancement or an addition. And it does appear to me that the church's addition, while keeping within the zoning requirements, they're not going to come in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals. They are hitting every single four corner of the lot upon which they sit. And maybe this church, while it has admirable goals, has really outgrown the lot upon which it sits. And it may need to look at another location in order to continue to serve its congregation, its needs, and its goals effectively, instead of trying to cram a square peg into a round hole. So I see what you're saying, Mr. Tagle, Mr. Hudson, and of course the chair. And again, I agree with some of the comments, and I disagree with some of the comments. I will say that I don't entirely disagree with the residents' claim that change is bad, and I don't necessarily agree with the residents' claim that what's good for GM is good for Troy. I do think that this is one of the more difficult decisions that we are faced with as a planning commission. I do think that as a family-oriented community, we do want to encourage family activities that may, for most of our families, maybe some of our families, encourage a house of worship. So that being said, I'm very interested to hear what others on the Planning Commission have to say.
The one thing I would add is also that this is the fourth time they presented to us, so I think we should come to a conclusion today.
Absolutely. I would absolutely agree with that comment.
Mr. Rumley.
Yeah, just thank you, Ms. Cruz, for your comments. And coming back to my first point, I'm just thinking that where it's going to end. Because if we start giving permission to the buildings like this, which is bigger than the existing building, and the next time another church, another mosque, another place of worship would come and then say that I need Sunday school, and this is really to the Planning Commission and the city that we have to ask ourselves the question, when are we going to stop this? Then we're going to lose all our green spaces. I'm just giving my comment based on like our city master plan. Obviously, for a place of worship, I understand there's a need for school. My sons go to Sunday school as well, but their neighbors, and then the way the building look like, the views, I struggle. It's too big. Why don't we just have the classrooms and then not have the gym? I mean, this kind of question we have to ask ourselves. So, but my first feedback or my feedback is like, when are we going to stop? And this is to the Planning Commission.
Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I think the Romanian Pentecostal Church is an asset to the community, and I think there have been some hyperbole been made tonight about what's being planned there. I would agree with some of the members who said this is definitely not an NBA-style gymnasium here. But I do have a concern about the fact that the massing of the building so close to the adjoining residential areas is a concern I have. If they were looking at a one-story addition to create additional classroom space, that would be not such an issue for me, but the fact that they want to accommodate a gym so close to the adjoining residence is a concern that I have.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I'll pipe in. My concern also is massing. But that said, I realize the church has done a lot of homework to bring about the best solution on that north side of the building. My overall thought from meetings ago was that piece of property in Troy can be properly drained, properly built upon to have your addition on the south side. I'm not a hydrologist or an architect or anything else, but I know if that piece of land is developed and engineered properly, the south side could be utilized. The other thing is, two other things. One is, like I indicated at the very beginning, my concern is, okay, we're approving this for now. To me, it's not compatible because your trees are going to take 10 years to grow. 10 years from now, it could look pretty decent. Do I impose on the neighbors? Well, for 10 years, you're just going to have to look at some growing trees and some lights coming out of windows. And I'm not going to even comment on the sound because I'm not an expert on it. But I know from just practical experience, if there's a game going on in a building with kids screaming and yelling, even with triple glazing glass, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a din of a noise if the people have their windows open at night, the neighbors. And you're talking 2 to 3 times, according to the pastor, 2 to 3 times a week this is going to be utilized till 9 to 9:30 at night. I struggle with that, with the hours of use. So all that put together, I think there's other valid solutions for this. I don't think it meets compatibility based on the trees taking 10 years to grow and the massing of the size in the meantime. The massing will disappear in 10 years, but I'm not willing to impose on the neighbors a 10-year wait.
Mr. Lambert, do you have a comment? No? So we seem to have some varying opinions. But I think we need to move forward with a vote. So is someone prepared to read a resolution to see if we can get support, I guess one way or another? Are you looking for it?
I'm looking for it.
It's page 38.
Page 38, that's helpful. I don't know that I can do anything with it, but I am. If I read it, and I'm willing to read it, my assumption is I'm reading it as affirmative, and then we will vote on it either yes or no.
Yeah, I would suggest you read it based on your view of it, and we'll vote on it yes or no on your view.
On my view, because I'm the reader?
Well, because you're making the motion, right?
Okay.
The passer won't pass it, then we go to the resolution, unless someone feels different.
I'm not an expert on the Roberts Rules of Order, but I'm certainly happy to read it with my view, and then we can vote on it.
And then we vote on it.
Okay, I can do that. Resolved that the special use approval and preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Bethesda Romanian Pentecostal Church addition, north side of Long Lake Road, east of John R., south of Tucker, 2075 East Long Lake, Section 12, currently zoned R1C, one family residential district, to be denied. The Planning Commission makes the following findings of fact and conclusions based on written materials, comments, and testimony of the applicant's representatives, other interested persons, professional consultants, and other factual material presented to the Commission to assist with its deliberation. Number one, the building addition is not designed in a manner that is harmonious with the character of adjacent property and the surrounding area because the applicant has not mitigated the building massing and visual impact through architectural design and landscape buffering. The building massing is inconsistent with the character of adjacent properties and the surrounding area. A tenet of the master plan is the protection of single-family neighborhoods. The proposed addition is not compatible with the existing homes on Tucker. Number two, the proposed addition does impact traffic on Tucker Street and does significantly impact traffic entering and exiting the site. We didn't really discuss that.
Well, and I was going to ask, do we need every number in the resolution read, or is it sufficient?
Can we strike
it?
You can strike it. That is a proposed suggested language that is to be used to assist the Planning Commission. It is not necessary that you use every point.
I would strike number two with traffic impact, and I would strike number three on public facilities. And I would also strike number four, which reads the addition complies or does not comply with all applicable ordinance standards. I would strike that as well. Number five states the proposed addition does not or does, and I would say does, unreasonably impact the quality of the neighborhood on Tucker Street in comparison to the impacts associated with typical permitted uses. Be it finally resolved, approval shall be subject to the following conditions, none.
I'll second.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Zarnicki, the roll.
That was support by Commissioner Krent?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
No.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
5 yeses, 2 nos.
So the application is denied.
So the application needed 5 votes to take action, and that was received. So the application, as you stated, has been denied.
Thank you. And so what's the next step then for this project?
That's for the applicant to determine this special use application has been denied.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 7. It's public comment for items on the current agenda. Are there any members who want to speak, of the public that want to speak on an item on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, I'll move to item number 8, Planning Commission comment. I'll start with Mr. Taylor.
This was hard. It wasn't a perfect project.
Mr. Savinant, hold on. Excuse me.
I just want to caution, the applicants have left. We've taken a vote. Mr. Savinant and I have talked about this issue before when we rehash something that we've already voted on. I don't want to stifle your comments. I just want to caution you to not sort of reiterate what just occurred here, because they've now left.
I guess I'm not sure then, should I not say anything about?
No, I don't want to stifle your comments. We've taken a vote, we've had deliberation, there's no sense at this point rehashing everything.
So it's okay, just as an example, I'm not the attorney, so
Go ahead.
saying this has been a difficult application is fine, but saying this is a difficult application because this detail and then rehashing a specific detail when we've already vetted it at a public meeting. I think what she was trying to do, Mr. Tagle, before you were committed to a path, is just remind all planning commissioners that it's been.
And I appreciate that the vote's been taken, and there's really of no value to go down that road. My only point, this was a difficult decision to make. I saw value on each side of the table here, and we all have different opinions.
My comment echoes John's point. Is it was a very difficult decision. There are obviously two different sides to this story, but I voted the way I felt was appropriate.
Ms. Cruz.
Same. One of the harder ones that we've come across. Saw value on both sides, heard both sides of the arguments. It was absolutely a tough one, and I don't think we're done. I think we're going to be faced with many more really tough decisions going forward.
Mr. Hudson.
I'm gnashing my teeth and I won't say anything, but I'd like to change the subject. The graphics tonight, these presentations were outstanding. These were new graphics. The planning department is a responsible party. Kudos to you. It was well done.
Oh, I have to add.
Yes?
Pick me. I realize that everyone has left the room, but I do want to take this opportunity to make the comment that, earlier in tonight's meeting, I may have confused you with some of my questions and my comments. And I'm just going to go on the record as saying to anyone who cares to listen, if you're an applicant in front of our planning department and you're meeting with our consultant and you're meeting with our director and you are not listening to what it is that they are telling you about the application, you need to stop that. They are giving you really good advice. And if you plan a meeting with them and you come in front of them and they are saying do this or do that, you ought to heed it, because they understand what we want, what our vision is, what the master plan says, what the city needs, and they're giving you good advice. So with that, I'm done.
Mr. Rothman, anything?
Well, I agree that it was a very difficult decision, so there are points on both sides. But I just want to go back to that point that I was trying to establish, like how do we prevent this kind of decision? Is there any process? Because this, thank you for clarifying that it passed through the compliance. But to me, it's like, is this something that how can we really change the compliance so that next time another project comes, we don't have to go through this emotional situation? So how does it work out?
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yeah.
I'm not going to speak, I'm going to answer your question in the general, not speaking about this application.
No, absolutely not, yes.
So I would just remind the Planning Commission that property owners in Troy have property rights. And zoning is, the way I describe zoning, it is a balance of property rights. So the applicant who seeks approval for a project has rights, as do the neighbors that abut the property and are in the neighborhood. And what zoning is there for is it's a bundle of rules that tries to strike a balance between the rights of the property owner and the rights of the neighbors and the rights of the city. And we do that through provisions such as maximum height requirements, setback requirements, open space, et cetera. So the applicant has the right to seek approval for projects that are permitted in the zoning ordinance. And the master plan addresses the overall vision for the city, and the zoning ordinance implements the vision of the city.
Can I add one more item?
Yes.
So I'm an engineer, so my questions are more technical. So what I was thinking is, remember the other applicant was trying to make 267 apartment complexes and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And they were saying that the height of the building is meeting the 30-feet requirement. So that's why I'm saying this kind of applications are being seen, and it will come in the future. So that's why I'm just thinking that you mentioned that I agree with you. I'm sure that you know what the zoning compliance a lot better than me. I'm learning. I want to learn a little bit more also. That if I have two properties, I have a setback requirement, whatever the requirement is. But then when I have one property, one attached building I consider as one building, and the building has a maximum height of 47 feet, I mean, it's a tendency people would try to take the advantage of it and say that, okay, well, I know my next building which is attached, I'm just using 30 feet high, but then I can take the advantage of 50 feet requirement of the setback. But then, as I mentioned, that in the section 6.21D and E, it clearly says that if it is higher than 30 feet, we have to add 1 foot for every additional height. Now, how does it really, is it something that's mentioned somewhere in the zoning ordinance? I could not find it. I didn't even check in details, but I'd like to know.
So we've gone back and forth on this already tonight. It's already 9 o'clock. So what I would do is I would invite you to meet me for a coffee, and we'll have a good discussion.
That's a great idea, because this is a technical aspect. Okay.
Well, welcome to the Planning Commission, Mr. McCure. So, any comments from you tonight?
Just a couple. First, thank you for welcoming me to the Planning Commission. I wanted to thank Ms. Dufresne and Mr. Savadent for giving me a thorough orientation a couple weeks ago to the Planning Commission. I appreciate that very much. And also, I wanted to thank Mr. Tagle for his comments in the first application about what we can do to make sure Rochester Road looks as well as possible. When I was first, it was first announced I was being appointed to the commission, somebody sent me a message and said, "I'm glad you're on there. We want you to make Rochester Road great again." So thank you, Mr. Tagle.
Thank you. Ms. Zarnicki, anything?
No, thank you.
Staff? Brent?
Nice job running a difficult meeting.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Ben?
Just echo that comment. Also want to welcome Mr. Lambert. Look forward to working with you in the future.
And Mr. Frank?
I was going to say welcome to Mr. Lambert. I enjoyed working with you on ZBA, so look forward to working for you here. I know a couple of you asked about the Tollbrook lawsuit. I don't have an update. The last time I checked, the court had not issued an opinion on 3 of the other matters that were argued the same day that I argued, so I'm not in the worry zone yet.
My only comment, and I think a lot of people talked about it, I thought we had great dialogue on the Planning Commission today about the project. I think it was fact-based, dispassionate, and a tough project. So we are adjourned.
Good.